In this video, we'll be going over some of the new terms that we will be learning about in science class. These terms will be dealing with both photosynthesis and the flow of energy through an ecosystem. The first term we're going to be looking at is photosynthesis. This image here does a really good job of representing what is happening during photosynthesis. So in photosynthesis, plants are taking energy from the sun and they are converting that energy into food. But it's not only sunlight that is going into the plant. As we can see from this image, carbon dioxide is also going into the plant, as well as water, and the water is going to go through the roots. The roots are also going to collect minerals, which are going to help the plant survive as well. What happens after the plant goes through photosynthesis is the plant releases oxygen. So we can see that we have oxygen leaving the plant. So again, sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, and minerals are all going to go into the plant, and the plant will be releasing oxygen as it conducts photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is going to take place in the chloroplasts of plants. Chloroplasts, if we remember, are an organelle that are only found in plants and other autotrophs. So chloroplasts would not be something found in animal cells. And this is where photosynthesis takes place. That's why plants are green. Those chloroplasts have a substance inside of them called chlorophyll, which makes them green in color. As stated, this process is going to take carbon dioxide, water, and light energy to create glucose and oxygen. So we can't see glucose in this picture, but glucose is the sugar that is going to give the plant energy. So it is a form of chemical energy, and we call that special form of sugar glucose. Make sure that you are getting all of this information down in your own glossary. All the highlighted green terms are blanks in your glossary, so you should pause this video and get those terms down before progressing. The next term we are going to be looking at is matter. And the reason that we're going back to matter, even though we went through this in our physics unit, is because it is a big component of photosynthesis. So we have different forms of matter that are interacting with the plant. We have liquids in the form of water that the plant is getting, as well as the gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen, which the plant is taking in and releasing. So our definition of matter, again, from the beginning of the year, is anything that has mass. So anything that is made up of atoms and takes space would be matter. Again, pause the video as needed to get all of these terms down in your own glossary. The next term that we are going to look at is energy. Just like matter, energy is something that is very important to photosynthesis, so we want to have it in our glossary. Energy is the capacity to do work or transfer heat. The transfer of heat is going to be something that we will circle back to. That is going to be important when we look at food webs and food pyramids. There's a lot of heat transfer that happens when organisms are going to consume or eat other organisms. Now we get into our food chains, and this is something that you'll likely be familiar with already, but we're going to review it anyway. So this chain does a really good job of showing a basic food chain. We have our producers at the very beginning. Those are our level 1 organisms on our food chain. Those are our autotrophs. So plants and any other autotrophic organisms, so organisms that are going to perform photosynthesis, would be found at this first producer level. Then from there, we have our consumers. The consumers that eat our autotrophs would be our primary consumers. The consumers that eat them would be secondary, tertiary, so on and so forth. We can even get up to apex predators, thinking of things like sharks, lions, and every organism that is not an autotroph is then going to be a heterotroph because they will be eating other organisms for food. So the way these food chains work and what is actually being displayed here is a series of events. So one organism, which is going to be the eaten, is consumed by another organism, the eater. So the grasshopper would be the eater of the grass. but the eaten of the frog, and so on. The way energy and matter work in a food chain is they flow from the eaten to the eater. And we can see this through the arrows. So the arrows are the way that energy is flowing through this food chain. Energy is moving from the grass up to the grasshopper, which then moves up to the frog, to the snake, and so on. Sometimes we might see something that is a little bit more complicated, and this would be in the form of a food web. So a food web is a series of overlapping food chains. So food chains go in a straight line, but if we have several food chains that are going to connect with each other and interact, like in an ecosystem, we might need to create a web to represent that. Just like in a food chain, energy is going to move from the eaten to the eater, and the arrows will represent that flow of energy. The last way that we can represent food and energy through an ecosystem is through an energy pyramid. And what energy pyramids are going to tell us is how energy is flowing through a food chain. If we notice in this particular energy pyramid, there are more organisms at the bottom than at the top. This is not something that we did just to make it look nice. There's actually a reason for this. And the reason is that there actually is more organisms at the bottom. If we think about it this way, the grasshoppers are going to need to eat a lot of grass to survive. The mice are going to need to eat a lot of grasshoppers to survive. The snakes are going to need a lot of mice, and the hawks are going to need a lot of snakes. But what happens is that when those grasshoppers eat that grass, they're not getting all of the energy from the grass that the grass performed through photosynthesis. Some of that energy will be released in the form of heat. Then when the mice eat the grasshoppers, some more of that energy will again be lost in the form of heat, and so on and so forth until we finally get to the hawk. That's why we need so much more grass than hawks in our ecosystem in order for everything to be balanced. And that's exactly what we have here. So the transfer of energy is inefficient, which is just a fancy word for wasteful. And again, that's due to heat loss. This happens during digestion, so we don't keep all of the energy from the food that we eat. As stated, this means there are fewer organisms in each level of the pyramid. You have to eat a lot of the previous level in order to meet your energy needs. Again, just a reminder to write down all of these terms in green in your own document. Our next term is trophic level, and this is exactly what we saw in that energy pyramid as well as in our food chain. Our trophic level is the level at which the organism is depending on what they eat. We are always going to start at the first level, which is going to be our producers or our autotrophs. So any organism that does photosynthesis would be our primary producer. It would be our first trophic level and the bottom of our food pyramid or food chain. Producers are a fancy word for autotrophs or a synonym for autotrophs. We learned about autotrophs already, as well as heterotrophs. Producer is just another word when we're talking about food webs, food chains, and energy pyramids. They provide the basis for all organisms within an ecosystem. Without producers, other organisms are not going to be able to get the energy they need to survive. If producers are another word for autotroph, that must mean consumers are another word for heterotroph. And again, these are organisms that eat other organisms.